In simple terms, role level security allows us to control access to rows within a table based on specific conditions. It is particularly useful when different users, or we may call them roles, should have access to different subsets of the data in the same table. So, what it does, it helps us enforce that data privacy and security policy by restricting access to specific rows based on a user's role. Okay, let's use an analogy to make it to explain it much simpler. So imagine a library with a large collection of books. The library has several sections such as children's books, adult books, and restricted books. Different visitors to the library have different permissions. So children can only access the children's section, adults can access both children's and adult sections, but only librarians can access the restricted section. So what row level security in a database, what it does or works simply by allowing you to define rules that determine which rows, in our analogy that's books, a user, in our analogy means visitor, can see or modify based on the role that they have. Okay, so how does row level security work? It involves two main concepts, policies and roles. So, row level security uses security policies to define the rules for accessing the rows. Policies are where we are going to define the rules, or as we may call them, conditions. These policies detect which rows can be accessed by specific roles, which is our second concept. Access is often based on the user roles that have been set. So Supabase already have predefined roles that are already there that we'll get to see. And based on these roles, they have different meanings. There are roles that are authenticated and there are roles that are not authenticated. There are roles that you can access without even a user account. So we'll get to see that. So those are the two main concepts. So despite however much explaining it in simple terms makes sense, most of the hard work comes when creating the policies, because whatever condition that you set in the policy will actually determine whether your table is, or whatever you have done is working as it should. So mostly the work is in creating the policies. Once you have the roles, you define the roles within the when creating the policies, and inside the condition you specify who do you want to actually see specific information. If, for example, I want to see my user profile in the policy, I need to specify only I should be able to see my own profile, right? So those are some of the things that are involved when creating policies. Those are some of the conditions that you put in. So just a brief on what are the advantages of row level security. Already, because it has the word security, of course it means it's important, but what makes it so unique? It provides precise control over data access down to the individual row. As I had said, when creating a policy, for example, for a user profile, you can create a condition to a point where you say a user can only see the row that has information of themselves, only their information, and you can't see the user profile or user information of other users. That's how down to the individual row you can go. Next, it also ensures that users can only access data they are permitted to see, which enhances data privacy and security. That's obvious. And lastly, is that security policies are defined and managed centrally in the database. That means we're not going to create these policies in our application logic, okay? This is done all in the database, which reduces that need of complex application logic outside, externally, okay? So now let's proceed to create or to implement role level security for our project. There are 3 steps involved in implementing row level security. So first is enabling the row level security, and it's a feature that restricts, as I said, restricts access to specific rows in a table based on conditions you define. So when RLS or row level security is enabled on a table, PostgreSQL checks policies associated with that table for each SQL operation, which is select, insert, update, and delete, and determines whether the operation is allowed on a per row basis. So in terms of that step, enabling RLS, Supabase has done it for us, or we already left it as it was. If you remember, when we were creating each table, we left the enable RLS as active, as enabled, so we did not disable any of them. So we're kind of ticking off the first step automatically. Now, the second step is creating security policies. So in PostgreSQL, as I said again, a policy is just those set of rows that now you define to control access to now the rows within a specific table. Okay, so a policy defines the conditions, and you can create different operations for different operations like select, insert, update, delete. You may decide for select, this is the specific condition that you want to be executed in terms of in the policy. So for select policy, you're just controlling which rows can be selected. And then for insert policy, you're controlling which rows can be inserted. Update policy, which rows can be updated. And delete policy, which rows can be deleted. And we'll get to see that. So for example, a simple syntax of how a policy would look like, maybe a create policy command. So how a policy would look like when you're creating a policy. So you'll need the create policy command and then that specifies the condition under which the access is permitted. So you'll need to specify a policy name and then specify which table you want to create the policy for. And then we'll have the operation. The operation, as I said, is either the select, insert, update, or delete. And then lastly is where now you define the condition. And this condition to either return a true or a false. So it's a Boolean expression, and it defines whether the policy allows the operation on a row. But not to worry so much, because Supabase auto-generates some of this part of the policy based on what we select, and you can edit the condition accordingly. So policies are automatically applied once created, so you don't need to execute anything else. Once you save the policy on a specific table, it's automatically applied. So in this tutorial, we'll define our conditions as simply true. We'll just enter the condition, the text true, because we're coming in as unknown users, and we'll get to talk about that in a few. So the third step is adding a role. So PostgreSQL uses roles to manage access permissions. We mentioned that. And Supabase maps every request to one of the many roles that it has, but mainly we have two. The unknown, which is an unauthenticated request where the user is not logged in. So an unknown role does not have a user account but has public access to the database using an unknown API key, and that's how that's the role we're going to use when interacting with Supabase database from our app level. Will be unknown users. Then there's the authenticated role, which is an authenticated request where the user is logged in. When we come to the next tutorial about Supabase Auth, that's where we now implement authentication. That's when now we'll switch from an unknown user to an authenticated user. So in this tutorial, we're not managing authentication yet. So we will execute our request as unknown users and advance as we go. Great. Let's perform these steps on our tables. So the first step is enabling our row level security, which we already did. We made sure that every table that we created, both in the public and the packing schema, the RLS is enabled. So step 1 is out of the way. So the next step is step 2, and they'll go hand in hand with step 3. So we'll proceed to, we can start focusing on the public schema first, and I'll start with the profile. So what is involved in step 2 and 3 is creating policies and also like setting the roles. And we do this in one place at the same time. So to create a policy, we'll head over to view policies. So we're working on the profiles table first. You just walk with me every step and I'll explain in detail in everything that I do. So we'll click on view policies. So currently we do not have any policies. We have row level security enabled, but we do not have any policies set. So what we'll do, remember we said we have 4 operations or 4 types of policies that we can create: select, update, insert, and delete. So for the profile table, The operations I will need, it will be select, where we'll need to read an information about a specific user. So we'll create a select policy. We'll also need an insert in the point of where we are signing up, and we want to add the record or the information of the user who has signed up into the profiles table. So we'll need an insert policy, and we'll need an update a policy where we'll have some information. If we head over to the table editor and just proceed to the edit table, this point, there's a point where we'll need to add the phone number, and it's not straight from the sign up. So this is a situation where we'll be updating an existing record already, so we'll need an update policy. So let's just let's go back to view policies and start creating. So we'll click on create policy, and then we'll come here and do let's create first a select policy, and then we can specify which type of user. We are unknown users, so I'll just select that. So as I said, Supabase already auto generates for you some part of the policy, um, the policy that you're supposed to create. So already it's creating a policy called we can give it a description here. So let me just use an example, like let's see, let me just select this. I just need the examples of descriptions that they have. So I'll just click on select, and I need to set the role as unknown users, and then I'll just update the description or the policy name, enable read access for unknown users, and then it's going to be implemented in the profile table, and it has specified, let's specify the role. I seem not to have done that. It specifies the role to an unknown user using, so here is where you set the condition. But I mentioned previously that in the policies that we're going to create, since we are working as unknown users, I'll just set the condition as true. There is no complex condition that I'll set here. I'll just set the Boolean expression to return as true. So I rate it as is. As long as it's an unknown user, we'll just let it go through for now for this specific tutorial where we're talking about Supabase database. But when we get to Supabase auth, we'll need to like validate a few things here, and if it comes out true, that's when the user will be able to, for example, do a select statement. If it comes out false, they cannot select. So that's our first policy. I hope it makes sense. So we have the policy name, we have the table that we are setting this for. We have made it to be permissive. We have defined our policy command or operation as select. We have defined our role. So those are step 1, step 2, and step 3, and we created our policy over here and set the condition as true. So let's save policy. Great. I've said another operation that we'll need will be the insert in the point of sign up. So we'll just do the same thing here. I'm just picking some of the templates that they already have, then I change it to my liking. So I'm just going to say enable insert for unknown. So I'll remove authenticated and just specify as unknown. Let me just remove authenticated, and then I just come in and describe the policy name properly. So unknown users, sorry, I need to set it over here, unknown users. And then we have our table on clause, and then the operation that we're setting is an insert to an unknown role, and we have set the condition as true. So we can click save on that. Then lastly, we'll have the update in the situation where the user needs to update existing information. We'll have that in the app level. So we'll just create update. We're just using existing template, enable update for users. So I'll just specify unknown based on user ID, or just say enable update for unknown users. Just make it simple, and then we'll come here, and as you can see, for this specific template, it has a condition set. For us, we're not basing it on email where we need to do some create a Boolean expression. So all I'll just do is come here and just delete all this. But this is an example of what happens in the what you're supposed to insert in terms of the condition. There are a few things you need to set in. So I'll just delete this. Let me just choose, I've just taken a different template. Then I'll just remove all this, set to true, go back to setting the name that we had, which is enable update for unknown users, update profile, and then we specify here unknown. So we are creating a policy, an update policy for an unknown role, and we're setting it as true. Simply as that. This is the bare minimum of creating a policy. So now we have set policies for our profile table. The reason why we are doing this again is that in case, for example, if we finished up with setting up on Supabase and headed off to start integrating or interacting with Supabase from Flutter, if we tried to connect with or communicate with the database, mainly the profile table, in this case, we will not be able to get the information that we need because we don't have any policies. We enable the row level security, but we do not have any policies set, so we'll get an error. There's a specific error code that we get. I'll get to show you that. So we need to do this to all of them. The fact that we have enabled RLS, which is a good thing. Next, we're going to have vehicle. Click on view policies and we start creating. So for the vehicle table, we'll need two operations where we'll get to select information about a vehicle, and we'll also get to insert a vehicle record. So we'll just proceed to create policy and do a select, and then just say enable access for unknown users, and then select, specify the unknown role. So and then we make sure the condition is true, and then we just save policy, done. Create another policy now for insert. We'll just say enable insert for unknown users only on the vehicle table. Insert, specify as unknown, the unknown role, and then we just confirm our policy is okay, set to true, save, and we're done. Now let's proceed to the next table, which will be favorite. So let's create, for favorite, we'll need an insert, obviously, because if the user saves a specific backend area as a favorite, we'll need to insert it in the favorites table. Then we'll need also the option to select, where we get a list of favorites for a specific user. So we'll need a select policy. We'll also need an update policy, where we'll need to update specific information. In this case, if the user hasn't set it as not favorite, or we can also create a delete policy instead, where we can allow the user to delete the parking area as no longer a favorite. So let's just create the four operations. We see whether we'll need the update, but we will definitely need the delete policy. So we'll just start with select for unknown users. I'll move fast. Public select, and then I'll just proceed to select an unknown role, and then make sure it's true. So we have our select ready. Then we create a policy for insert unknown users only, and then we just proceed to specify our role, which is an unknown, set to true, correct. Then we can proceed to update. Let me just pick a simple template there and just say enable update for unknown users, and then we'll just make sure that it's for the unknown role only, and then we'll just remove all this, the condition, and just set it straight to true and save this. And lastly, we'll have the delete, which will be enable delete for unknown users, and then we'll just specify our role and just set this straight to true. When we get to interact with Supabase auth, you see these are examples of conditions that we'll need, or Boolean expressions that we'll define. Okay, so that is true. So we click on save. So we have our four policies. Great. Now I think we are done with the public schema, so we can proceed to the parking schema. For the parking schema, we can start with the parking area. Wait. So for the parking area, the only thing we need to do is just select or get the list of rows from the parking area table. We're not going to manipulate that table. We are taking it as an assumption where we have an admin portal where parking areas are being inserted and validated. So what we're doing from the app level, we need to just read that information. We're not supposed to manipulate it. So it will just be a select policy. So I'll just click on select, enable for unknown users. Pick the unknown role and set it as true, save policy. Great, now the next table will be parking detail. View policies. So for the parking detail, whenever a user decides to select a specific parking area and books it, that's insertion. So it will need an insert policy. And also we have a tab in the app where we'll need to view all those bookings the users has made, so that we'll also need a select policy. So those are two policies that we need. So we'll just click proceed to create policy. We do a select and specify here for unknown users, and then we select our role and make sure it's true, save. Then we'll also need an insert policy. We just click on one of the templates and change it. We don't need the authenticated for now. We need an unknown role and make sure it's true, and click on save policy. So we're done with that. So our next table will be back to the parking schema, will be the parking flow. For the parking flow, all we need is just to get records from that parking flow. Almost it's the same concept as the parking area. Actually, all the four tables that we imported data from an CSV file, we just need to read records from those tables. We don't need to manipulate them. So no, wait, there's one of the tables I will need to manipulate in terms of availability. Sorry about that. But most of them, the other three, it's mainly the select, where we just need to read the records and display them on the Flutter application. So just do a select, create a select policy for unknown users, and we just define our unknown role, and then we have our policy here. We have the correct role set, and we set the condition as true, and we are done. Back to our schema. We have parking lot, view policies. We'll also need a select policy alone, as I mentioned, for unknown users, unknown role, set to true, click on save. And the next table will be back to our schema. The next table will be parking slot. So for a parking slot, as I mentioned, we need the select policy like the other three, but we'll also need an update policy, because it's a place where the user, when the moment they book a specific slot, since it was available, once it's booked, it ends up being no longer being available. So the availability will be false. So we need to update that. So we'll need an update policy. So let's just first create a select for unknown. Unknown, and then we make sure the condition is true, and then now let's do the update. Create policy for update for unknown. I just remove this whole boolean expression and just set it to true and click on save. And there we have it. If I go back to the parking schema, we are actually done. Awesome. So we have enabled our LS, we have created our policies, and we have also added our roles. We're specifically focusing on an unknown role. Okay, I hope that made sense. And the beauty of doing this in the process of configuring the configuring the tables and configuring the databases, that when the moment we go to the app level, we don't need to always come back and sort some of these issues, because the moment you enable row level security, if you're trying to select or insert and you haven't defined your policies, you'll definitely get some errors. Okay, so now let's proceed to the next.